Okay, cool. All right. We'll get started then. Hey, thanks everybody for joining the meeting today. Appreciate having you all here. And it is a pleasure to see folks, or to at least have folks in the meeting with people who care about presentations. So we're going to talk about that today, and why presentations matter a little bit. I'm going to go over some of the kind of fundamentals about presentations and what we have learned over the years at BayCreative about making good presentations, making them effective, making them useful and productive, so that meetings are succinct and clear, and get the results that you're interested in getting. So let me move ahead here. And presentations matter. So I wanted to start off, if people might oblige us and drop into the chat how you use presentations. What do you do? What do you use presentations for? Do you use them for sales? Do you use your presentations for meeting with partners? Are they primarily internal? Do you use presentations for reporting to executive teams, or do you use them for training? Do you use them to teach people things, or as a reference point for training? If people would want to just take a second and throw a couple of things into their chats to us, we can get a little idea about how folks use presentations.
Okay, they can do that in the Q&A.
In the Q&A, yeah, it says chat.
Yeah, everyone can write.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
So drop your comment in the Q&A.
Thanks, Taylor. Sales prezos. Okay, good. Sales. Marketing. Yeah. Another sales. Okay. All right. Oh, solution overview, branding and training. I like that. Multi-purpose. I use presentations for executive level presentations. Yeah, excellent. For customer briefings, internal meetings, sales and partner events. Wonderful. Okay, excellent. Communication to stakeholders, marketing, presentations, and training. Wonderful. Okay, so safe to say presentations are an important part of folks' lives here, and preparing them is important. We tried to craft a little message about what we think presentations are. What's the purpose of presentations? And we came up with this. It's not perfect, but to bring everybody present into harmony with the purpose of the meeting and inspire creative thought about it, about the meeting, about whatever it is you're talking about. And the reason I like inspire creative thought is really, ideally, a presentation is clear enough and succinct enough so that people start to have ideas about whatever it is that you're presenting about. They start to apply themselves. So I'm thinking of creative thought there in terms of a person applying themselves to whatever the topic is, getting into it, getting excited about it, wanting to have a comment, wanting to engage. Really, if you're not doing that, you might as well send a video, or you might as well send something canned. So the whole point really is to have people engaged and interested at that level. Whether or not they're interrupting your presentation, I don't know. But is that a bad thing? It's somebody who's eager to step in and get engaged and say something could be the best outcome in a presentation. That might be, not getting to the rest of your slides might actually be a good outcome, depending on how you're working it. Let me move ahead here. So great. So how do you use presentations? Thanks for adding all these notes in here. So obviously there's a pretty wide array. There's probably, I would say today we're heavily weighted on people wanting presentations for sales. But I think that the things that we're talking about here, at least at the high level, pertain to any kind of presentation you'd want to produce. We tried to put this presentation together in such a way so that we're going to talk about fundamentals that would apply to anything, sales and the like. So presentations matter. So more than a set of slides. Here, let me get out of show mode here for a second, and I can just talk to everybody. Boom. There we go. So I suppose you can see me now. More than a set of slides. So what do we mean by that? Well, obviously there's more to a presentation than a set of slides. There are some, there's the speaking part of the presentation, there's the visual part of the presentation, the slides itself, and then there's the storyline and the story flow to the presentation. We look at those as a set of fundamental, building blocks to making a presentation good. The slides, in a sense, are really just a canned portion. They're set up in advance. The live part of the presentation is the speaking, obviously, and that's where there's variability and the idea there being that the slides really complement the presentation. The presenter is the presentant. So, okay, some ideas here. Lessons from. Let me go back to show mode here. Here we are. Here we go. So lessons from architecture. I brought that in because I was just in preparing this, I was thinking a little bit about architecture, and I remembered something that a creative director told me many years ago about how you can learn from architecture and how we can kind of understand from architecture and how we can apply the lessons from architecture to design. And I thought it was really interesting. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me back then, but reflecting back on it over the years, it is kind of interesting. An architect, the role an architect plays in a building is figuring out how the pieces ought to all work together. So there's a usability aspect to that. It's got to function the way a building needs to function. At the same time, it needs to have aesthetics. It needs to appeal to the people who are going to be using that building, and those two things need to meld together. And in a lot of ways, the preparation of a presentation is like that too. It needs the hand of an architect, so to speak. One of the things that happens a lot of times, I think, with organizations, at least in our experience, is that you'll have the different people at an organization working on a presentation. You'll have an analyst who is, mulling over the data and pulling that all together. You'll have an engineer or a technician or a scientist, putting their input in, saying what they think is important. You'll have maybe somebody who's an account manager or customer service person who is, dealing with the prospect or the customer or whoever else at the human level in terms of, building the relationship and such. What oftentimes is missing is someone who is architecting the presentation itself. it looks, what we see oftentimes is a group of people working on all the things that need to go into slides and pulling that together. And then, whoever drew the short straw is the one who sits up till 2 in the morning struggling with PowerPoint or Keynote and trying to make everything look good. But an architect working on a building engages with the contractor, engages with the customer, engages with the people who are going to use the building in those various ways, uh, and is a part of the process from the beginning to understand how this all ought to come together into a building, a structure that accommodates people in all these ways. Same thing with presentations. If there's an opportunity to have kind of an architect involved with your presentation, you have a chance of doing some improved work, and just in the same way that would apply to a building. Let's see here. So another analogy for presentations: getting dressed. Right? You wouldn't go to an important meeting without adjusting your tie or straightening yourself up in some way or another. You dress for the occasion, be that meeting on a golf course or whatever, sitting in a bar having a beer, whatever. You would dress appropriately. Same thing with the presentation. You want to dress the presentation up so that you are appropriately appareled, so to speak. So just a quick little note on process. Going back to the way presentations get prepared again. I like to use the analogy of don't pack a suitcase. A lot of times, when you're going on a trip, you throw everything in. You want to make sure it's all there, and you say to yourself, well, I've got everything packed. I'll show up and I'll unpack it and I'll know it's all good. We've seen on many occasions, people throw everything into the PowerPoint deck. It's all there. We'll sort it out, kind of last minute, get there, and we'll at least not be missing anything, right? I'm not saying everybody here in the room is doing that, but it's what we've noticed, and there's a tendency to lean in that direction. And it's something that you want to avoid. You're not creating an experience very good that way. So the team, group creative, kind of going back to that idea of an architect, you want to be able to have a team together in your process that can play the various roles. And again, we look at the architect of the presentation, the designer, the creative side of the presentation as a part of that team. And when it's possible to bring that into the process, you can get some really wonderful results. You can get some, you can elevate your final production. Not a buffet. Again, that kind of plays to the idea of the suitcase. You don't want to just serve up stuff and have people pick from it what they want. You want to have a multi-course meal figured out, basically, and present it like you would a multi-course meal. Neil Young. I heard an interview with Neil Young not too long ago, and they asked him. I mean, folks here probably know who Neil Young is, or if you don't, you can look him up. He was asked by the interviewer, how do you write hits? They said, Neil, how do you write those hits? He said, I don't write hits. He goes, I write songs. He goes, nobody writes hits. You write a song, and what makes it a hit is that bass player in the studio who wrote riffs for James Brown, or the producer who knows exactly how to mix things together and play with the volume and organize the balance between the sounds and all. And he goes, that's what really makes hits. He goes, a good song isn't going to be a hit. He goes, you need all these players to put it all together and make it really sparkle. And And that's kind of what we're talking about here in terms of presentations. You've got a storyline, a story flow. You have slides, which you've spent time with, or various degrees of time, making them look good or not looking good or whatever. Maybe you even have a designer working really hard on creating those slides, and you have your spoken text figured out what you're going to say. But it's when those things really come together and meld that you wind up with something special, and that's how you get a hit, basically. And it's not any different with producing music than it is with actual presentation work. Another analogy, jazz band. You wouldn't have different people working on their individual parts in a jazz band and then showing up the day of the performance and trying to make it all happen. Those guys need to practice together in order to make it good. And that's what we've noticed with presentation work, is that when we have the opportunity, or when someone has the opportunity to work with that team in that group, and part of that group is the design and the creative aspect of that, of what's going to happen, you wind up getting that more integrated approach, integrated quality. You hit notes that you couldn't hit otherwise. So story, a little bit on story here. One of the things that's, I think, important in defining the difference between a presentation and a video, or something that you're just sending canned to somebody, is that it's not transactional. It's not a here's what we're offering, say okay and we'll do this, or say no and then we'll go here. It really ought to not be a transactional. It ought not to be a transactional story flow. It ought to be something that speaks to what it is that the two can do together. So where you can land, where you can go together. So in the interest of that, what's expected by the people you're presenting to? What are they just thinking is gonna happen? What would be the baseline? Then what would surprise them? What would give a person something to be excited about? What would be something new? What would be something fresh in the presentation that they were not thinking about before? What would be delightful? We want presentations to be pleasant experiences. Going into a meeting, regardless of what it is, a sales meeting or anything else, obviously you can walk into the room, you can think hard about it, that it's either a win or a lose. But I think we all know that sales and marketing, it's a process. And so more than anything else, I think you want people to not more than anything else, but as a part of everything else, you want people to be left with the feeling that the meeting with you was pleasant, was a good experience. These guys, you want to leave folks with the notion that these guys they're organized and they have something good to say. It's nice to listen to them. I like the fact that they put things out in a succinct way that's clear and easy for us to understand. Maybe this deal isn't the perfect deal right now, but boy, I could see getting another deal with them later on. That might be. They're people I can talk to and work with. I understand them. So to the point there, is your storyline, is your story flow something you could say to a child? What would happen if you told this story to your 5 or 6 year old, or someone who is innocent of what it is you're trying to do, and that sounds kind of nefarious there, but not aware of what it is you're trying to accomplish, let's say. And is it a good story? Are you explaining it in a way that a child could understand? So just a couple of notes on speech here. Yeah, this kind of goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier. People present and slides complement. So Uh, Again, the slides are the canned portion, right? They've been figured out. I don't think anybody's going to step into a room and start designing slides while they're presenting them. The slides are figured out, but the people present. The person speaking to them, talking about what's going on. They should be additive. Um, and in the interest of that, kill the jargon. So that's an interesting point. Jargon is a sneaky thing, and the way it works, I think, a lot of times is it's hard to recognize. Is probably the key point there. What you've gotten accustomed to and comfortable saying in the office with your coworkers and everybody else, it's no longer jargon there because those terms and that language is all stuff that everybody's familiar with. Oftentimes, in our experience, we see people, taking that for granted and tossing out, phrases and terms that just don't make sense to a prospect or a customer. And there's nothing to gain from that but alienation. You're not making yourself smart in any way, and you're certainly not connecting. So it's something to avoid. Now, visual. So in visual, so we're breaking this down in a couple of ways. This is the place where a lot of people struggle, I think, in presentation work. Does it look good? And I think what happens is, again, going back to the process and the flow in presentation work. If there is a design team, if there is a design group, or the marketing department, the presentation gets figured out, thought out, worked out, and then handed over. And when that happens, it's difficult. It's difficult to get what you could get out of visual, because there is a lack of understanding in the design function of what this is that is being designed. What are the relationships of the elements on the slide? What's the purpose of this slide? And I think what happens is that the designer, bless them for their hard work and all, is working with their hands tied because they don't quite know what to do except for just to, dress things up, maybe put it in brand as best as they can. But otherwise, a deeper understanding of what's trying to be said and what's trying to be communicated will benefit design, or design should at least be able to add something there. Somebody comes to the design group and says, here, can you make this pretty? Would you please make this look nice? Sure, you'll get something that looks a little bit better, but in the back of the mind of the designer, the thought is, well, I can make it look good, but I can't make it a better presentation. I haven't had the opportunity to work with that and figure that out or participate in that. This just has a little to do with a design idea of adding some impact and emphasis and drama to a slide. What will do that? And I think that the idea of making something big and bold, making something stand out, doesn't have to necessarily be something crazy or radical, but bringing order to the slides and bringing order to the layout and the design allows you to break some rules, and then breaking the rules of that design gives that power and emphasis, and kind of pushes it forward. That one shouldn't be there. Sorry about that. We already covered that. Clever, not cute. All right. So anyways, let me get into some examples now here. So I want to start with a slide that we got a while ago. So this is for a company that is developing a product. It's a wonderful product. It's to help veterans, and there's a a lot of trouble with veterans, with suicides, of course, and other difficulties that they have. And so they've come up with this clever solution that works with text messaging, which seems to be a very comfortable way for veterans to communicate. And so they're really engaging with them well. They're really connecting really well with these vets out there using this tool. And it's called Early Alert. And what they've done here is they've prepared kind of an interface to show how their interface works. So the attempt in this slide is to say that we have an individual. Here's what we know about this individual. We have identified some risk factors. We know a little bit about what they're communicating, and what kind of what they're saying back and forth to folks. And then that information is getting processed and analyzed. So there's a little analytics going on in the back end here with amongst these variables here off to the left. And those are getting flagged or rated, red, yellow, green for, the obvious color coding there. That's pretty good. But this slide is kind of disorganized. When you look at it, there's not a lot of emphasis on this slide. Your eye kind of wanders around all over the place. You don't really know what to look at first, and you don't necessarily know how all these things are relating to each other. And so it makes it difficult to kind of understand what is being said. So we played around with that and reworked that a little bit. And so the idea here now is to set this up. So sure, it looks better. It's it's clean. It's kind of organized. Looks a little more professional and all that good stuff. But there's also some work done here in terms of organizing the information in a better way, so that there's a flow to what people are seeing. Well, first of all, something that's missed is a title to this, and there is something that is to be said about this, which is the veterans' experience in their own words. They're learning. There could be a number of different titles there. Learning from the vet's experience, or gaining information on where vets are by understanding what they're actually saying. The vet's experience in their own words, we thought was kind of a nice, pithy way to describe what this is. There is indeed an inquiry, which again in that prior slide is just buried up there under the logo. And it's not so much that the people who put this slide together said, "Oh, we want this to be our slide." They didn't want this to be this slide. They knew this didn't look good. They didn't really know what to do with it though. And putting the inquiry number up there made no sense. Let's put the inquiry where the inquiry is, and that's related to the individual talking here. There's information about the person, right? Again, that's shown up here real big, fat, and bold at the top. Turns out that's not so terribly important for what the message of this point in the presentation is. So let's make that smaller. Let's tint it back a little bit. All they need to see really is that there is information on this vet, and we can get into the details later. Stick that in the appendix. Another change made here was to get rid of this this funny little stuff down here at the bottom. Let me see if I can get a little highlighter pen going here. No, I didn't want that. Hold on. Laser pointer. There we go. This little information down here, risk factors and resources. Okay, this is risk factors here. It's a screen, and there's another one called suggested resources. So let's just put that up there and leave it there, and we don't need it twice. Wellness trends was over here, but it's really something that happens after and as a result of what is getting learned over here. This feeds into the wellness trends and supports that information. So let's put it to the right. People read left to right. Let's stick it over here. So now you've got you've got a better setup for this. And it's more than just making it look good. It's understanding what's trying to be communicated here, and discussion about what is it you really want to say, how do you want to say this. So that's some of the idea. Another thing going on with the hierarchy of association here, or the hierarchy of things, you can see how I don't want to beat this up too much, because again, nobody thought this was what we wanted it to be anyways. But there's the way that things are related to each other. This is too close to this. This is closer to the edge of the screen than it is to this window here, which is what it's related to. And this is as much related to this as it is related to this on the left, right? So this gray tint behind all of this makes it really easy to see these are the things that are related. These are the things that go together, this inquiry kind of relates to all of it. Wellness trends relates to this part here, and of course this relates to all of it as well. So there's a header to it here. And finally, the last little bit of this would be that there's the logo. That's important, but it's on every page anyways. We don't necessarily need to have that at the front of the whole thing. All right, so just a little quick side by side here. I kind of talked about this enough, so we'll push on to a couple other examples here. I want to leave time for some questions. These are a couple before afters real quick. Here's a company we worked with. This is for an executive in-house meeting. Slides coming to us talking about their initiative over time to deal with the application of chat. And so again, through talking to them and understanding a little bit more about what they're trying to do and what would go into speaking notes, we were able to strip this down and get this simplified so that it's a little more clear in that quick 20-minute meeting they have with the executives. They can see pretty fast, boom, 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 boom. That's when things are going to happen, and these are the things that are on track. And that's all that matters. Here's another input. Again, nobody was really thinking they would use this, but in the course of talking about it and thinking about it, we were able to, vastly simplify this. We've got 3 different, parameters that we're considering, and these are the dates associated with those. It's another one. A lot of data here. Not particularly easy to read or understand. In this instance, deciding not to use these line graphs and going with bar charts turned out to be much more informative. And again, there was a lot of simplification that could take place here. We just were able to get rid of a lot of stuff and make this easier to follow and understand. This is kind of a fun one here. An executive summary. So here's everything somebody wanted in the executive summary. Here's the information that summarizes what's happening. There's a lot going on here, obviously. Lots to look at. The numbers are important on the right there. Key value drivers. So after talking and working with the client, we discovered that something like that could really be better done here. A nice bold statement up front of what this is all about. 5-year benefits from Nuke Opera platform. And then here are the 3 most pertinent points that you need to understand with regards to the effect that this platform is going to have. And then over to the right, there's your big numbers. And they're organized, they're easy to follow, and you can see the most important number, total benefits there. Whereas this is kind of lost and buried. So, but again, that comes from discussion. I don't think as design we would be able to create something like this from something like this without a very thoughtful discussion. about understanding what it was all about. This is kind of another interesting graphical situation here. This was cumulative value and cumulative cost. We thought, okay, these are, interesting line graphs here, but really the story is better told by, showing the delta between these over time. And so we wound up showing this. It's both a more honest graph because it starts at 0 and goes up, and this also shows really easily side by side the comparison between cost and value, which was really kind of what they were trying to get at here. We didn't discover that until having a discussion about that, but this solves that problem a little bit better, and the client was happy to see it that way. This doesn't really have a before. The idea here was to show how disjointed the situation is with healthcare and patients. Patients are losing patience. How things kind of come together. Again, a real clear message about what is required, and a little more detail about what that is off to the right, and how a platform approach towards this puts the patient at the center and makes all this work. And then from that, we can see the benefits that occur. There's another nice example here where we were stuck. Ordinarily, we don't like sticking all this much stuff up on slides, but we were stuck in showing this massive application of a platform, and so we did that. And we thought, here's a case where animation helped out a good bit. They needed to show the existing capabilities that were currently being in use and purchased. Then we needed to see how the addition of ME service management would affect that. Added a little blink there to kind of draw your eye to things on the screen as they appear, to make it even easier to follow. And then finally out here, here's one where slides started out as what we heard, guiding principles, kind of a summary of that, and then this monster here, where there is a process that's been thought out here. Our understanding, what we think is getting between you and success, how we can accelerate your ability to deliver these objectives, and then what we can offer, right? There's a lot there in those three. So we took a look at those three as a whole, and again, in the interest of simplification and keeping it really clear, we were able to join guiding principles and the overall objectives into one slide and shortened everything here. And that big monster that you were looking at a minute ago, this guy here, really better done this way. Accelerate initiatives, areas of focus, and then deliver. It's kind of figuring out what needs to be said or what's being attempted to be said, and then organizing that in a better way. Okay, so I've done a lot of talking here. Wanted to ask about Q&A, and if anybody has any questions. And we can't hear people, can we, Taylor? Or can we? It's too much to have like audio assigned.
No, on this webinar, we cannot be attended without.
Okay.
Yeah. So they can drop their questions in the Q&A and we can answer them.
Okay. If anybody has any, feel free to to enter any in. And if not, we have a link down here where people can get a recording of this class. And feel free to catch up with any of us at BayCreative as well about this. Talk to me or Scott at BayCreative. Let's see. Wait, hold on a second here. Let me see if I've got something in here.
You can check your questions now coming in. We got a question from Bob, Jeff, and Jerry.
Okay, so let me look at my. So how do I get to this? How do I get to these questions here?
Do you want me to read?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay.
Oh wait, I
So
see
Bob
here. I
asked.
see here. I
All
got
right.
Bob here. I noticed your
Perfect.
PPT template is blank with just words. Is that what you are recommending? No, I'm not recommending that. I'm recommending that we just create the slides to suit the purpose. I think that this presentation is mostly speaking. So instead of having pictures and images to articulate what was being shown, I just thought everybody could look at my pretty face and listen and listen to the words being said. But hopefully from the examples you see later on there that obviously images are can play a really big important role. But I would say too that it's important that images are not gratuitous. Well, depending on what you're trying to do. I mean, if a presentation is entertainment, okay. If you're trying to impress people with snazzy graphics and fancy images, that's fine. But I think what's far more impressive is a real succinct and clear story and a real clear organization of information on the slide that's easy to follow. And that's always our first goal. Dressing up a presentation with a video, a short video or something like that, or some very fancy slides, certainly can benefit and catch people's attention. And it depends a lot. It depends a lot on what the use is. We've created presentations for keynotes where I don't know, some thousands of people are watching. Obviously, in a situation like that, you really want to hook people. So you might want some sound, you might want some audio, you might want some fancy animation. We've spent more time and effort on the opening 30-second video than we have on the entire presentation in some cases. But I'm thinking of things here today more along the lines of what can anybody do, to kind of clean things up and make things better. So hopefully that answers your question, Bob. Jeff has a question here. How many slides is the ideal presentation? That's a really good question. And I think that's something that you discover. 5, 10, 20. Ordinarily, most of the decks that we work on at BayCreative, they're in the range of 10 to 20. But geez, we did a presentation, very high level presentation. Oh, thank you, Bob, for turning off audio so you could not heckle. I appreciate that. So, anyways, coming back to Jeff, we've done presentations that are 3 slides long. It just depends on what the customer or what the prospect is looking for and needing. The driver for that ought to be the story being told. And if people are we like to find ways to put things into the appendix. What actually needs to be up front in the presentation itself, and what can zoom back into the appendix, to complement it, to be looked at for further reading. So hopefully that gets to your question, Jeff. Yeah, awesome. And I got a question here from Jerry. Oh, yeah, here we go. When working remotely, I sometimes have trouble getting clients to communicate what they need. Yeah, that's a tough one. And that's hard. I mean, I think it really, comes with it's hard working remotely. It's hard to get that level of communication. I think that maybe what helps in that is, I mean, I don't know the individual situation you have, but certainly taking time, going through things methodically, trying to not leave stones unturned, are all things that are going to really help a lot. And when you're in a remote situation, I mean, that's not just a problem for presentations, it's a problem for everything, right? Trying to have that two-way interaction. I mean, this is difficult this one way. I love having this chat here because now I get to interact. I feel like I was talking into the void, before. It's a weird experience, but it's certainly, slowing down, I think, is probably the best advice there. Um, Hopefully that answers your question, Jerry. Please feel free to add more if I'm hitting it or not there. And then Mark has a question here. If the audience is technical, as a presenter, we tell the story versus reading from the slide. What is the right level of technical detail, architecture, to have an image that relates but doesn't tune out non-technical? That's a really, really good question. And that kind of gets back to the jargon point, and it also gets back to the team. It's hard when you're an engineer and you're a technical person yourself, and you tend to think that way, and you tend to look at the world that way, and you tend to look at the presentation you're creating that way, and your communication with other people that way. So, I mean, what happens is you wind up telling the story from your perspective and your vantage point. We can't help but to do that. That's the only vantage point we have. That's why that group creative process is so important. It might not seem important on the surface, but getting design involved or a creative process involved early enough to comment on what is being said. What happens is you wind up getting that kind of layperson test of what you're telling. And if, again, would a child understand this? And are you using jargon? Are there terms you might not recognize? Most people don't recognize the jargon they use. Most people don't know when they're speaking in jargon because they do that all day long at work. So it's really a matter of getting that fresh or outside perspective on what you're trying to produce as a presentation to really help make sure it's going to be something that resonates. And again, to never be shy about feeding the appendix. We like to say that our presentations have hungry appendices, and we don't want them to go hungry by the end of the creation of the presentation. So, and there are ways, with animation, when you do have to show something very, very technical, like some of the slides we were showing earlier here in our little show, that big gigantic org chart with all those boxes and everything like that. That was a must-have, and we argued as much as we could about avoiding that, but no, it had to be there. So animation and movement, that can help present information on the stage and guide the eyes so people will follow things a little more easily. You can imagine starting with the slide with everything on it, and then, where am I supposed to look, right? So let the animation or let the sequence build as you want to build the story and tell the story. It's a great use of animation. So hopefully that helps, Mark. Please, respond or anything if I missed anything there. You got it, my friend. Megan, what do you think about personalization? I try to personalize for the audience, but it takes a lot of time. That's an interesting question. So Megan, could you tell me, I want to understand what you mean by personalization. Do you mean like, showing the person in the presentation that you're presenting to, their picture, or talking about them, or if I could just get a tiny bit more info on what you mean by that, I think I could probably answer that question pretty good. certainly we want to consider the audience closely, and we want to think about, who they are. Yes, right. Exactly. Of course. I mean, that's critical. Understanding, really carefully figuring out and anticipating what we believe, the presented to, the presentees, if you will, what are they expecting? What are their expectations? What are they, again, what's going to surprise them? What's going to delight them? Thinking that through pushes you to consider them more closely and carefully. Just like buying somebody a present, at the holiday season, right? You think about what's going to give them a sparkle in their eye, what's going to make them happy. That's the case with everybody, even in the driest, most, mundane kind of topics. People like to be, delighted. And so, what is it that could really make them, happy, bring a sparkle to their eye? Certainly, verticalizing and paying attention to various industries is key. We've done a lot of that. Setting up templates for sales presentations at organizations, and putting together the various vertical template work. But beyond that, right, even within a vertical, there's going to be this company, that company, these people, those people at various companies, and they're going to have their own special interests about what they want to see. So anything you can do to speak directly and specifically to them is wonderful. How much of that is in the slide? How much of that is in the speaking notes? That's something that it can be worked out in terms of the flow and the experience of the presentation, and certainly both are candidates for helping that. So hopefully that it got your question, Megan. Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you joining the meeting and participating. Yeah. If anybody else has any questions, we can stick around for a few more minutes. Feel free to add them in. And again, let me go back here. I'll go to the next slide here. Well, there's this link down here. Hold on. There. At the bottom here, we have our link, baycreative.com/masterclass. At BayCreative, we've been doing this for probably 25 years now. And we've created presentations for all sorts of uses in sales and on and on and on. Training, executive communications, and a whole range of things. We'd be more than happy to follow up with anybody who wants to get a little more info on the work we do and how we do it. And please follow the link below there. And thank you very much for joining today. Excellent. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. I think that's it. So, again, a pleasure having everybody here. And if there's no more questions, we'll end 4 minutes early, which I'm sure isn't going to upset anyone.